You're listening to Business Lunch with Roland Frasier. This is your seat at the table.
Hey everybody, Roland Frasier here with Business Lunch, and I'm very excited to have the ability to welcome my guest today, Kara Goldin from Hint. Kara, welcome to the show.
Hello. Yes, excited.
Now, I see you've got a piano in the background there. We seem to share at least we both have one. Are you a player of pianos or someone in your family?
People in the family, but you know, I can't say that I actually. You wouldn't want to hear me play. Let's say.
My wife gave me. My birthday was last week, and my wife gave me for my birthday. She had the automatic piano player thing added, and so now we've got, like, from the iPhone, 18,000 songs that it'll play, much better than I play. So it's
that's awesome. I love it.
So it's good to have and bad to have at the same time.
That's awesome. But, is this new? Did you just start playing recently, or?
No, I played out in clubs. I played keyboards in clubs and cocktail piano and all that stuff from about 15 to 42. And then, as much as I enjoyed playing out, it's too hard because it's, 9 or 10 at night to 2 or 3 in the morning. And, you have to be around and travel because people want to play and all that. So, but it's fun. It's a great thing. And now
I did not know that about you, Roland. That's a little tidbit. So that I did not know. That's awesome.
Well, tell me. So we're all having wonderful times at home during the coronavirus quarantine as we speak here today. So tell me, how are you adapting, like, personally and business wise, at Hint with the changes brought about as a result of what's going on?
Yeah, so I definitely got my setup all set and got the webcams and the mics and everything finally set up at my house. But I think for us, we were reasonably set up for this situation, probably better as a company than a lot of other companies, in that, we had, for a beverage company, we've always, as we've always had about half of our business is online, and, the other half of it is in stores or in food service. And so, we were somewhat prepared in that respect for it. But, I think, look, it's a crazy time, and I think we're just, checking in with our team to make sure, obviously, that they're okay, and their loved ones are okay. And it seems like everybody, has their 1 degree separation away from somebody that was affected by it. And hopefully a lot of those people are getting better. But, we've also had some people that unfortunately have lost people that they love, which is really, really tough. So I think that the one thing that, I was just saying to somebody this morning that is, I've been talking about how important health is for the last, 15 years since I started Hint. And I think I was a little bit ahead of where other people were at. And, over the years, I feel like, I talked to people, and especially people who were Hint fans were like, oh yeah, you really helped me drink more water, or you helped me, lose weight, or whatever it was. But today I think, with COVID, Corona, whatever you want to call it, I think more and more people are kind of wanting to stay healthy because they believe, and, a lot of it is that we just don't understand why certain people are getting it and other people are not getting it, even people that are living in the same house with other people. And I think that at the end of the day, like, health will, when all this, shakes out and people get back to, going back into an office and going to events, et cetera, I think that, health will be something that people will take a lot more seriously. And I think it's more and more, people are realizing that even if at the beginning of your shelter in place time period, you were, grabbing a bag of Cheetos and munching them down, and, a full sugar soda or whatever, like, you're probably not doing a lot of that anymore because you're just, feeling the effects of it, whether it's by weight or depressed or whatever. So I think, like, that's a key thing from a, mindset perspective that I think everybody should, if you're not there yet, I think it's what the world is going to be thinking about.
And we were talking a minute ago before we started that Hint is an essential. I would argue that it was an essential all along before the official designation. So that's kind of cool. What as far as your personal brand, as yeah, because I know you do a lot of speaking and being out and about, supporting the company and things like that. How has that changed as far as what are you doing now that you can't really show up for those events and things like that?
So, I mean, I've had a couple of keynotes actually that were canceled that actually asked me one was actually doing it live through Zoom, and then another was actually taping it through Zoom. So, so far that from that perspective, and then most of them pushed out the speaking engagements to later. But, I think people are really just trying to figure it out and what's best for them. I think, that really hasn't changed too much. And again, I've, stayed really busy with Hint just being an essential item for, not only the stores, but also just making sure that inventory is there. And we've also just, through the process, I mean, again, sort of what a lot of, I mean, it's sort of the story of my life. I mean, a lot of the stuff I can't say that I was like strategically like thinking this is the way that we should build our business. Cause what if this, I'm not Bill Gates, right? Like what if this, would have happened? But I think things like the fact that we did everything in the US has come up as, a question. For example, we're going in nationwide into Costco. We've been sort of, I wouldn't say arguing, but sort of pushing them to allow us to go into Costco, not regionally, but actually to just, go into all of their warehouses throughout the US, and they haven't wanted to do that. And they reached out to us, 3 weeks ago when this whole thing was starting and said, hey, listen, you guys do everything in the US, right? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, we do all of our bottles and labels as well as the fruit and everything else. And they said, that's great. We want to flip the switch and have you guys go in nationwide. And DECA, which is
great.
Yeah, huge. And so, again, like, just the fact that they even remember that about us, right? That we talk about that as, something that, we do. And I think is a really important piece. So again, just, kind of being out there and just telling people, what you're doing, I think has benefited. And then also DECA, which is the big, military, way that you get into the military. I mean, they also reached out to us as well. And so I'm pretty sure that, there's probably some retailers that are short on supply because a lot of the merchandise is coming from outside of the US. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think people are, still trying to figure this whole thing out. And in the midst of it, they need to keep their store shelves stocked, and we've been able to, be there. And I think also just, one other thing that I've learned in this process too, that, just trying to take this time to figure out like, what could we be doing better? And this happened 3 weeks ago when we were, starting to see that people were hoarding the shelves for, essentials, and sometimes Hint, sometimes toilet paper, but going in and actually figuring out, looking at, grocery store systems, whether it was Target or, other specialty stores like Whole Foods, and seeing that our product was out of stock, we weren't afraid to actually say to them, hey, I think you guys have an issue here, but not just telling them that there's an issue with their replenishment system, also saying, but we can solve that problem for you by just sending in a truckload tomorrow. And I mean, it's amazing how 50% of those retailers actually then said, yeah, we'll do that, even if it was an interim step to
Right.
Being able to figure out what the issue was. But I've said to some of my friends, they're like, how are you staying in stock in all of these stores? And I'm like, it's just, I think it's just not being afraid to actually not just cite an issue, but also say like, here's how you might be able to solve the problem. So, so again, I think like that's the key, the key thing.
I love that. Now, I noticed,
Yeah.
and I'd love to get your opinion on this because I see so many smart people from Richard Branson to Sarah Blakely building their personal brand to prop up to support the business. Would you talk a little bit about because you didn't really have one to start with, you started the company and then you've kind of paralleled your personal brand along with that brand since then. What are your thoughts on the importance of that for business people?
I think if you are, first of all, I think, both of those entrepreneurs are like, amazing to me on so many levels. But I look back on, their stories, and I'm not sure that they really thought about themselves as personal brands either. When they first started, it was really like, hey, here's why I want, to do what I'm doing every single day. Here, I've got a why. And then they went and pursued it. And along the way, they heard that they were crazy. They heard, who wants pantyhose, they figured out well, maybe not a lot of guys wear pantyhose. And so maybe that's why they're not funding me. Just lots of, stories along the way. And I think that what they've done, which is so critical, and frankly, what I try to do too, is sort of tell, some will call it the failures along the way, but also just story tell around how hard this was. Because I think more and more consumers look for brands that, are authentic, are, where there's somebody behind the brand. And I think that gone are the days where you can just go launch first of all, I don't think you can go launch a drink brand today or even a food brand that doesn't taste good, at least to the majority of the population. It has to have, I always joke about Red Bull. I don't think if Red Bull launched today, I don't think it would actually be successful. It's not to say that if you were a drink of the past, that you can't build that brand up and get people, hooked on your brand or whatever. But I think that today consumers look, and this is partly because of the media, right? They look for brands that they can actually talk about, right? It's not, when Chobani launched as an example, it got on the shelf, it had great packaging, but you actually want to know what's their story? And maybe you don't know the story the first time that you try the product, but you want to know the story behind these brands. And so I think that it is, a failure for a product if you, don't actually talk. If you do not have the ability and the story of your why to actually go and talk about, what the situation is and why you ultimately did it. And I think it can be frankly in any industry. Look, we all see problems, and that's why we decide, gosh, I should just go do this. I should go start a company around it. I should just go launch this product. And, I think that's the most important piece. And then you fall in love with the brand even more. And I was just talking to somebody about this today, that I was, I'm pretty active, I would say, on lots of social, but I'm pretty active on Twitter. And yesterday I was, when people come into my Twitter, oftentimes people are like, oh, I just thought I probably shouldn't be here because, I don't really care about beverages, for example. And why would I listen to Kara about the beverage? And the more that I hear you talk about things, it's not just about what your knowledge is of the food and beverage industry, about, the water industry, about being an entrepreneur, but you also have curated a group of people who are curious and who are interesting. And, I had a gentleman say to me the other day that I've never really had women who, and this was on Twitter, I've never really had women who, have been around me, who have been kind of role models and who are talking and thinking about things. And I feel like the people that I follow that end up participating in your conversations are the ones that are, I wish I knew them. I wish I knew them face to face, not from a, really from an understanding. And so I think that the more we can like interact and communicate, and whether that's, through Zoom or through social media or through, just storytelling about our brand, I think is just, it gets people to understand you and ultimately fall in love with, more things that you believe in.
That's very well said. I love that. I absolutely agree 100%. So tell me now you've, has Hint gone public yet?
No, we're we're a 15-year-old startup. I always talk to people about, and continuing to grow. And yeah, we haven't. And I don't know. I think it's an always, I get asked that probably, I wouldn't say every day, but every other day, is that something that we're going to do? And I don't know. I mean, we just continue to grow, and, the company's profitable, and, we don't have anybody, we have investors in the company, but we don't have anybody breathing down our throat to, sell the company or take the company public or get their money back in any way. We have a lot of really passionate investors that, just really believe in health, and many of our investors also believe in women entrepreneurs too, but there's plenty of guys that are investors in our company too, that just really, they just, love Hint water and believe that it is actually helping people a lot. So we'll see. I mean, it's 2020 is going to be an interesting year. Like I said, I mean, we're seeing kind of crazy growth. Every day I read about an e-commerce company that is laying off people, and, like their e-commerce is dead. I mean, that is not what's happening at all with ours. I mean, I would say in the last month, we've, probably doubled our estimates of what we thought was ultimately going to happen. So I think 2020 is going to be a really interesting year for Hint.
Well, now you have kind of the unique perspective of coming from making your first versions of this at home, right? Of taking the fruit and kind of creating the drink, and then going all the way to being a pretty significantly sized company. What would you say are the real key steps or the key things along the way that really contributed to growth, other than having a great product? We'll assume I have had my subscription to Hint and know that it is a great product. So that's not the issue. But there are lots of great product people who don't actually get growth. So what would you say some of the key steps along the way would be?
So I think actually, I believe that if you can, if you really see a problem that's out there, and I always think broadly about this, it can be really in any industry, don't assume that someone else has thought about that same problem, right? Like, I think so often I run into people who say, oh, I've got this idea, but, I'm sure, in the beverage industry, like, I'm sure CocaCola's thought about that idea. Like, the number of people who said that to me when I talked about my idea, I had a million reasons why I didn't believe that, but it didn't really matter. At the end of the day, I had this, like, I mean, I call it, without being too, foo-foo far out, like, I really believe that it was my calling to go do this, that I really saw when I looked at a store shelf with lots of beverages on it. I did not see a beverage that I wanted to buy. And this was after, I got off of Diet Coke, and I was drinking a ton of Diet Coke, and beyond Diet Coke, I was drinking water, but water was boring. So I said, I need something in between that just gives it fruit without sweeteners in it, et cetera. So I would talk to people about, hey, have you ever had a water with fruit in it? And everybody would point to like vitamin water or some other flavored waters out there. And I'd always be like, yeah, but it doesn't this and it doesn't do this. And so then I just kind of tired of that conversation with people. I remember my mom always told me, like, never discuss politics at a dinner party, because you'll never win, right? It'll just make someone angry, and probably you, right? And so I thought, like, it was like the same kind of thing. I would just like walk away from these conversations and just really annoyed. But instead, what I thought is, I own the fact that I didn't really know what I was doing. And luckily I had a little bit of money that I could play with. I didn't, I wasn't a billionaire, but I thought I had made a little bit of money when I was at AOL running their e-commerce. And I thought, I don't know, I can, I'll view this as my MBA in beverage, creating a beverage. Right. And so I just was having, yeah. And I mean, I was curious, like, I think like that's a big thing. Like, first of all, figure out, is your idea something that gets you thinking, right? And makes you want to learn more, right? And then second, like, are you more curious about this than maybe your friends, right? When you talk about this, do they think you're a little crazy, right? That you're like chatting about, something, and because you look back on Sarah Blakely and, others that are, Richard Branson, Steve Jobs. I mean, you look back on these people, they were all considered crazy, right? About their idea, right? They had the exact same conversations that we're talking about, but they were curious about it and they viewed it as a puzzle. And how do I ultimately solve the puzzle? So if that's you on your idea, like that's a really good thing. Then I would say that the final thing is, do you, can you get out of your own way? I think really what it boils down to, which I think is, I have this theory that the more educated you are, the harder it is, because you want to go and like cross all the T's, dot all the I's along the way, right? You want to be like, you're so used to being told, and not picking on like higher education, but maybe a little bit, like you're used to being told that you can't do something. And so I think that is the number one thing that you've got to say, like, okay, I'm going to go do this for, whether it's, for 6 months, or I'm going to spend X amount of dollars as an investment to figure out if this idea is there. And then, I said that was the last point, but I think that the next thing is just understand along the way that it's a commitment and it's a journey, right? That you're embarking on. And even if it's considered a failure, right? In your mind, in your friend's mind or whatever, like, what did you learn, right? Along the way. And that learning may allow you in your next venture to go and take what you learned there and, and do the next successful thing. So I never view, the world as like, if I tried something, I can say we had kind of a hiccup, or not exactly how we wanted it to turn out, but I'm always thinking about every single day, like, what did I learn from that experience? And maybe it's the founder's brain constantly, that the optimist's brain, but also somebody who's constantly, thinking. I mean, somebody asked me, like, how do you get through, this time? And I'm like, you stop and you think about how things, like, what would you do differently if you knew this was coming, right? That'll probably be a dinner topic that people start to ask around the table. Like, what would you do differently about this? I mean, for me, I was really excited that we had an e-commerce system set up. I know a lot of people out there that, in the food and beverage space, that were not as e-commerce enabled, and they, maybe not as obvious to people who aren't in that industry, but a lot of them relied on Amazon to ship their product. And unfortunately, if you're not an essential product at Amazon, then it takes a few weeks to get your product out there. So being too reliant on any one distributor or any one partner of yours, maybe that's what the learning is along the way. So yeah, I would say that's, kind of the key things, that I would say are some of the things that I've learned.
Now we mentioned, so speaking of learning, and also we were talking about Richard Branson. Now he made a go at the cola business with Virgin Cola, and then in talking with him, he's like, man, they played dirty. He's like, they basically just killed us. They like shelf space, everything, and you're kind of going up against that same group of big incumbent beverage companies. And I know when you were first talking to them, they were all like, it's not sweet enough. It has to be sweeter. It has to be sweeter. And you're like, no, that's the whole point. How do you, what would you say has helped you work and be able to survive that where, say somebody like Branson was not?
So I would say that, in the case of Richard Branson's product, Virgin Cola, I mean, he was going head to head with Coca-Cola.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, not just at a company level, but at a product level, right? Which is, that's crazy bold, right? And, don't tell Richard Branson I said this, but, I would say that like his product actually wasn't as good as Coke. I don't know what Coke puts in their product, but it just wasn't, right? And that was like, and, the taste, I think, is something, I mean, the point earlier about Red Bull, I mean, the taste is so critical, right? And people just got used to that taste. And so going head to head, is really bold, like kind of a different situation. In our case, we're not going head to head on any of their products, although they have over the last 15 years launched, I think, 7 attempts at competing with our Hint product. But the core there is that I've never been afraid of, Coke or Pepsi, and people, including investors that we've talked to have said, oh, that's crazy, that they could wipe you off the map. I mean, exactly what Richard Branson said. And I said, no, because the way that I see these companies is that they actually want to encourage people to stay addicted to sugar, to sweet. So when they don't do sugar, they do diet sweeteners. And, they actually hope that people don't stay hooked on diet sweeteners and come back to sugar. I mean, that is like, and for them, like people said, well, yeah, but they have a water brand. They do. They have Dasani. I'm talking about Coke. They also have Smart Water, and they have vitamin water. But for them to actually go after the market that I'm in, which is the unsweetened market, that means that they're actually telling people inside, their consumers of their mothership brand, Coca-Cola, that they want to encourage people to not drink something sweet. No, of course not, because they're a large public company. The day that, Coca-Cola sales, the Coca-Cola product sales or Diet Coke sales go down, it's really tough. So again, really understanding how the other coin thinks about things. I mean, for Richard Branson, he had the airline, he's had, the soda, he's had the phone company. I mean, he had the music company, he's had lots of different things. And I think he was, tossing things out to sort of play in these arenas. But, it wasn't all he did either, right? It wasn't,
he wasn't all in to that, right?
Yeah. And I think for us, I wanted to start this company because I wanted to help consumers get healthy. Coca-Cola can't say that. Pepsi can't say that and be believed, right? They would have to shut down their mothership products if they wanted people to get healthier. They will never say that.
So I have an interesting question for you then. If, let's say that you inherited Coca-Cola tomorrow, that Mr. Coca-Cola died and left you Coca-Cola, and you're the one that's making the decisions there, what would you do if you were CEO there making decisions, knowing how you feel about health, knowing how the things that they have maybe aren't the healthiest, and I'm being generous, and you have the social responsibility and feelings that you have. What would you do? Like, so I'm wondering, I guess what I'm really after is, what do you think the play is for them? Is it just double down on the bad thing forever and hope nobody catches on, or gradually have your market eroded away as people get healthier and think about these things, or what?
Yeah, I mean, I think okay, in a perfect scenario, I would probably, figure out how to buy back the shares,
Mhm.
right? I mean, I think that that is the core, challenge for them. That I've talked to many executives, not just at Coke, but also at, some of these other companies too, that are putting out products that the executive team doesn't necessarily believe in, but it's really hard. And it's a hard when you become a public company because you are living and breathing and will die by not actually, continuing to, do what the largest shareholders ultimately are telling you to do. And that's why a lot of, companies have bought their shares back. And so I think like that would be the number one thing. And then you can ultimately change your strategy. But look, I mean, I don't think, I, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens with this whole COVID and Corona. But I mean, that's just a whole other topic too, like above and beyond the fact that I think people are, probably if you're in a time when today it was announced that 15 million people are going to be out of a job, are you going to go and buy soda? Is that the first thing that you're going to buy?
My son
Probably.
is sworn off of vaping now because he can't afford it. I'm like so happy. It was like,
Totally.
yeah.
Right? I mean, you look at some of these things, and I think that, if you're a product today that is actually helping people get healthier and, you're less than a few bucks a bottle or a product, then, you're kind of, you might not, your usage might not be every day, but you're helping that person to keep their health, right? But if
Mhm.
you're a product like some of these others, that like the soda companies are offering, I think it's going to be really challenging. I think that the other thing that they're probably really thinking about, I had seen an article like 3 weeks ago issued by Coca-Cola that they're doing most of their can manufacturing in Asia
Mhm.
and they can't get the supply. And
Right.
they already announced like they're going to be hurting. So it'll be very interesting to see what their numbers are for this quarter. They're going to have to pivot. I mean, they're not going to have a choice but to do it. But I think that, I always tell people like the fact that I worked inside of large companies and kind of know how this stuff works, it is super helpful. You as well, right? When you work, it doesn't matter if you weren't, reporting into the board or like if you understand sort of, all the people like inside of Coca-Cola, for example, the person that actually runs the Coke brand or the Diet Coke brand
Mhm.
are, incredibly important, right? If you're running Dasani and you walk into a meeting with Coke and Diet Coke and Dasani, like the Dasani person's on the low totem pole because
Right.
they will never be that first person on that annual report. I
Right.
mean, I remember when vitamin water was bought by Coke for $4.2 billion, right? And crazy. And I remember talking to some very key executives at Vitamin Water, and they were like, "Can you imagine if like Coca-Cola buys you for $4.2 billion and they put no money in the first year into marketing?"
Right.
They were like, what are they doing? They were trying to take vitamin water. It was like a chess piece off of the table.
Right.
And then, then they figured, oh, okay, well, maybe it has some legs. I guess like the shareholders actually believe that, we brought a check for $4.2 billion. Maybe we should actually try and make that investment work. And so, again, somebody started talking about that. But the day that vitamin water actually sells more than Coke and Diet Coke, it's not going to happen because
Right.
they will not allow that stuff to happen. So again, I think for
Have to be a sea change with with the consumer to actually get that to happen, right? It would just
yeah,
have to happen. Yeah.
100%. And then, you look at these other companies too. I memean, this is really, you're such an expert on this, but it's the data side of things too. I mean, the fact that I look at Unilever, and when Unilever purchased Dollar Shave Club, I mean, I knew the banker that worked on that deal, and I was talking to her about that, and I was like, God, everybody was like so surprised because, Unilever going up against Gillette in the razor business. I mean, that was really crazy. And they were like, no, they just saw how much data that Dollar Shave had on this male consumer that wanted to order by mail. And they were like, we just want those names because we have all these other brands that are male brands that we can go out and market to. They recognized what it was. And to this day, I mean, I can't say that I talked to the people all that much over at Dollar Shave, but, Unilever kind of left them alone and said, just keep building your data. Like, that's great. And then we'll use that data to go out and market to or buy advertising, so that we have a better understanding, because it was cheaper for them than going out to an agency to go and buy that data. And so again, like I think that, there are so many reasons why you can go and like launch your idea and try and, build these businesses if you were really doing something that people are not doing. Like eventually they'll recognize that the value, is there, but sort of understanding who's on the other side of the table and understanding what their needs are, and maybe even understanding what they don't get yet. Like, that's going to be such a critical, piece of this. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of like the products, and especially the Unilever play to like sell their other products to those people who had the same kind of demographic, psychographic, you chose to expand. I think the very first expansion outside of the water was into the sunscreen, correct?
Yeah.
So was that the idea there, is that there's this need that you see in this market, just like you saw in the water market, and your hint buyers were most likely to be the same kind of people that would be interested in that thing? Or what kind of caused you to
so that was also an accidental surprise, a fun one, but I had some precancer cells on my nose and for a couple of years, and I kept saying, I'll just try a different moisturizer, get a better scrub or something. I had a million reasons why it wasn't a problem. And then finally got serious about it and had it removed. And I grew up in Arizona and should have worn sunscreen. I probably had baby oil on at times or something really stupid, and did a lot of damage back then. And so after, finally getting the spots removed and getting it under control, my dermatologist said, you really need to get serious about wearing sunscreen. And I even wasn't serious then. And it came back and she said, this isn't funny. Like you're really, 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 like, I know people that have died from, skin cancer, and you are not, like, you're a redhead, you grew up in the wrong place with too much sun. This is not something to mess around with. Right. And so finally I started asking myself the question, why don't I wear sunscreen? And I thought, well, first of all, I'll like wear makeup on my face, or like mineral-based sunscreens would make me itch and I couldn't wait to take a shower. And then also I just felt like, I don't know, I just didn't like any of them. I'm also allergic to coconut. And so for me, like the tropical ones, like sort of smelled not really what I wanted to smell because I'm allergic to it. And I thought, so I don't know. And I just felt like a lot of the unscented ones were just it wasn't creating a great experience. And so one day I looked for sunscreens and looked for, ones that I really want, and started doing my own research. And I ran across this article that talked about this ingredient called oxybenzone. And this was about 5 years ago. And this article that I ran into was written by the Center for Disease Control. And it was in the late 70s, actually. The Center for Disease Control had actually recommended to the FDA that they not approve. All sunscreens are FDA regulated. And so it was, so the Center for Disease Control recommended the FDA don't actually approve this because there's some information results that say that oxybenzone may enhance precancer cell growth underneath the skin. And I thought, God, that's really interesting. Like, that's probably what happened to me. I was like wearing oxybenzone when I was wearing sunscreen, and something happened here. So I thought, okay, I wonder if I could just make a sunscreen, because I couldn't find a sunscreen that wasn't mineral based, that didn't have oxybenzone in it. And actually, I found one in my dermatologist's office, and it was $45 a bottle. And so that was another issue that I thought, even if you could afford it, I don't know, $45 for a bottle of sunscreen just seems really expensive to me, right? And especially if somebody really needs to wear something. And I was like, it's not affordable. It's sort of, again, is against kind of what I've done with Hint, where it needs to be affordable. It needs, all of the stuff. So I went home and back to my kitchen. I started making my own sunscreen, not actually thinking that this was going to be a Hint product. And there happened to be my fruit essences on the counter. And I was testing something else. And I was like, God, I wonder if I put this in here like grapefruit, that would, I think I was like burning a grapefruit candle at the time in my house. I'm like, God, that smells so good. I wonder if I can create a grapefruit sunscreen. And so I dropped a few drops in, and I was like, this is amazing. And so a friend came over, she tried it. She actually used to work at L'Oreal, and she's like, sunscreens all have to be approved by the FDA. So if you guys actually put this together, you need to send it into the FDA. I was like, what do you mean put this together? She was like, oh, I just assumed you were creating a Hint product. And I'm like, that's really interesting. So download the forms from the FDA. I just thought, what the heck, they need a name. So I'm like, Hint on the name. And then, I figured it was a placeholder. It wasn't necessarily what we would ultimately use. The funniest part of the whole story was we got a call from the FDA a couple of weeks later, and the guy said, hey, I just wanted to make sure, are you guys using real fruit in the sunscreen? And I said, we are. And I said, have you ever heard of Hint water? And he's like, no, I've never heard of Hint. And I said, okay, so we're fruit and water, and there's no preservatives and no sweeteners. And so I had some fruit extract, and I used it in the sunscreen. And he said, oh, okay, well, sunscreens don't actually use fruit, they use fragrances. And which, again, like epiphany, like how much the food and beverage industry was ahead of this, sunscreen and personal care was just shocking to me on so many levels. And so I thought, wow, like that's really interesting. So I said, so how long will it take? And he said, well, we have to go through shelf life. Anyway, net, I sort of forgot about it. I thought, oh, it's just sitting in the FDA, and who knows what will happen. And then we got a letter in the mail that it was approved like a year later. So, the team at Hint was as surprised because they were like, wait, we're launching a sunscreen? I thought we were a water company. Like, what are we doing? And so what was funny is we had this direct to consumer business. So we launched it online first, just to sort of see if there was a market. And, we had a whole list of names. And so we threw it out there to people. And what was crazy, it was like 40% of people in January, which is when we launched it, 40% of our list, we said, hey, we just launched the sunscreen. It has real fruit. It doesn't have oxybenzone in it. Here's what Kara learned as she went through her, pre-cancer challenge. And people were like, I hope she's okay. Everything's great. We would love to, try the sunscreen. And so we sold like 40% to our list of names. And, and again, I think it's, it goes back to something that we talked about earlier, just being authentic. And, again, you can't make up that you had pre-cancer, right? Like, I think you just, you have to sort of say like what's going on in your life and be okay with that. And, you do such an amazing job of that too. And I think then you build community off of that and a lot of trust off of that as well. So that was, the story of the sunscreen. And what I think like the most interesting, beyond the fact that in January we sold just a ton, of product to people, and people love the sunscreen. I run into people all the time who are like, oh my God, it's amazing. And we mostly sell it online. We're in some specialty stores and Target and a few other, and sort of throughout the country. And I'd say probably like 30 to 40% of CVS stores, depending on whether or not they have sun or not. But I think like the most interesting thing that I learned about, that whole category as a whole is that I started to get phone calls from the beauty and cosmetics companies, the large ones that are like the Cokes and the Pepsis of the world, and that. And it was interesting because I'll always meet with people, right? And, you know, they want to come into our office in San Francisco. And so they came in, and I remember a major beauty cosmetics company came in, and I was like, I'm so curious, like, you know, why did you want to come in? And she's like, oh, I drink your water all the time. I follow you. Like, I, you know, really wanted to meet you. But more than anything, like, I think it's just so crazy that you are able to go with zero experience, go and launch a sunscreen. Like, you haven't worked at a lot of these, you know, sunscreen manufacturers. You've never done this work before. And, you know, you just went and launched it. And she said, we've known for years that oxybenzone is probably not that great for people, but for us to actually go and reformulate like all of our products is a major undertaking. And I said, I get it. Like, and we'll just do that for you. Right. We'll just go and like, and so I think at that point, she knew that I was going to really be getting the message out there. And I think, you know, since we started talking, I do think that other people started talking about oxybenzone. I don't know for sure that we were the first ones to really talk about it, but now on many labels, it says oxybenzone free. And we were one of the first to actually, you know, start that conversation. And that's what I think a lot of entrepreneurs, if you have a belief and you start a conversation about something, I believe that we can lead an industry, not just lead the consumer, but also lead an industry. And, you know, if they go and launch a competitive product, that's awesome, because we'll have built an audience, and I believe it'll be better. I believe our product will be better. It's hard for them to do real fruit. It's hard for, you know, they'll continue to do fragrances. They'll continue to do what they're doing, and that's fine. But I think there's room for all of us, I guess, is what I'm saying. And I think that, you know, if I can not only help consumers to find the right things, but also help companies do the right thing, you know, I think that's massive. And you know, I'll say one more thing. I was talking earlier today about you know, the whole clean water initiative. I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but I've been working with Congress to actually try and bring federal guidelines to clean water throughout the US. It's currently left at a state level, and things like lead are only tested in just a little more than 50% of the population. And other things like, you know, PFAS, which I don't know if you or any of your viewers have seen the movie Dark Waters that's on right now, but PFAS is a really dangerous ingredient in water that is primarily comes from Teflon, and some of the Teflon, there's a lot of lawsuits against DuPont and 3M and, you know, companies that make that product that ended up dumping it into the water. But it's a, you know, it's a really scary thing. So again, as an entrepreneur, you know, that has a mission to just help people enjoy great tasting clean water, I felt like it was my, you know, civic responsibility to go to my local Congress people. And, you know, the immediate question was like, where are the rest of the water companies? Where are the soda companies with this conversation? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, do they care? Do they care about health for their consumers? I do. Like, that's my purpose and my mission. So let's go. So hopefully by summer, I mean, with everything going on, we're supposed to hopefully have a congressional hearing. And once that actually, you know, gets on the docket, I'll definitely let you know. But it's for us, it's really, you know, people should have access to clean water. And if they don't have access to clean water, they should understand that their community or, you know, their faucets that they're drinking out of are, you know, not actually taking this ingredient out. And, you know, I always tell people that if you remember nothing else from the conversation, what I've learned about water is that if you are drinking bottled water, make sure that it has gone through reverse osmosis or RO. because that's incredibly important, and really even more so than the source of the water, because it's tricky. So
Yeah.
and it can really impact your health.
Absolutely. Well, as we sign off, and thank you so much. I love
Totally.
chatting with you always. What are the best places for people to get in touch with you, find out about you? I know you've got a great podcast, and just connect with you and your company.
Yeah, so I do have a podcast, Unstoppable with Kara Goldin, and I would love to have you on too, Roland, and that'd be amazing. And then just Kara Goldin on Facebook and Instagram, and as I mentioned, Twitter too, and yeah, I hope everybody stays healthy and gets through all of this crazy time, and keep the vision and positivity. I think that's super, super important.
I definitely want to give a shout out to Hint too, because people who have not yet tried it should. So what is the website for them to be able to do that?
Yeah, you can buy it in a ton of stores and through Instacart now too, but also at drinkhint.com has all 20 plus flavors, as well as the sunscreen. And then we launched deodorant as well, with aluminum free deodorant. And then also Amazon
deodorant as well.
Yeah, and everything is on our website. And it actually just got Real Simple Magazine's best deodorant on the market. So so just last week, which was so exciting. And it's a great product. It's brand new, so it's a little hard to find, and unfortunately a lot of these big stores right now are not really bringing in new products, trying to get through this craziness. So but it's online, and it's amazing, and we love it. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, Roland. Hope to see you live soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take it easy. Bye-bye.